This is week one of a new lecture. This lecture 15 is influence between the world of spirit and the material world. Uh, Being an early lecture, it talks about things differently than the guy did later on. Some people find the early lectures a bit difficult to understand. Um, it's easier if you've read a lot of them because you hear the explanation a lot of different times and you kind of get the overall picture. So when I speak about the lectures, I speak from, well, the overall picture is this, because yes, we can all get hung up on a particular phrase or a way something is said, if that's the only way, if that's catechism, if that's absolute, that could be a problem, but it's not. It's one version of explaining a concept. At one point in the lectures, the guide says that there are, he doesn't use a number, so being a human, I like to use numbers. Let's say there are 9 dimensions on the planet. We know there are 6, give it 3 more. There's 9 dimensions on the planet. In spirit, there could be hundreds. When spirit tries to communicate with human beings, they're coming from hundreds of dimensions down to our very limited single-digit number of dimensions, many of which not all of us are comfortable with, sixth sense and all that. So that the communication from spirit is by necessity limited. They're trying to, the Bible, the Quran, Urantia, Pathwork, Course in Miracles, any form of information that is channeled through spiritual means is by necessity having to translate into, and this is the tricky part, you're trying to feed all this information into the head of a 2-year-old relative to spirit. And so explaining it like that makes it easier for me to understand that relative to spirit, I'm a little kid and I can only grasp so much. They have to feed me what I can hold, and I do the best I can. So with that introduction, this lecture I rearranged because there were various pieces in various places. So I cut and pasted my heart out and put together this first section, which was about honoring your perceptions. And the reason I chose that subtopic title was because as you read a lecture, you're going to have perceptions. And these are important to hold on to. This is not the kind of thing where you read it, that's the truth, throw away your old beliefs. That's of no value whatsoever. This is more accurately analogized to, metaphored by, there are different ways of saying the same thing. There are wide perspectives and narrow perspectives, even if you're looking at the same concept, the same event, the same circumstance. The idea is if we've got a narrow perspective, we may have resistance to widening that perspective. Feels like we're giving up our point of view when we're actually gaining more perception by enlarging our context. One of them has to do with that this is channeled material. Now, when I first started, I was a normal person. I had never done spiritual work or therapy work or emotional release work of any kind. I was pretty much a newbie. And so the idea that this was channeled was just plain weird. And the first teacher I had said that his advice was don't worry about it. They said, read the material, and if the material is useful, make use of it, study it, enjoy. Don't worry about where it came from. And I thought that made some sense because I don't know where a lot of things come from. I don't know where the Bible in particular came from at some point. So you read you read something and you find it relevant in your life, you find it useful, it supports a direction you want to go in. And that's all I needed to know. So it took me many, many years before I was comfortable with the idea of spirit channeling through a human being. So if you're in that situation, I really empathize with you, not emphasize. Uh, and I'm going to suggest a few other resistances that could be going on. One is that we want the material that we're reading to be authored by an authority figure that we can trust. Well, if it's being delivered by spirit, who is the spirit and who's going to vouch for them? Where's their resume? Where's their, um, where's their Nobel? Where's their Pulitzer? Where is the support that says this is a good spirit to listen to? But this work is not meant for children. This work is usually read by people in midlife crisis. That's where I was. And now midlife is a big range, so it can happen, give or take from 30 to 90. Um, so the idea that we want a guarantee that the material is reliable is not something you're going to get. This is why religions have to rely on faith. Uh, Faith, it's not necessary to have that level of blind faith. It's not necessary to turn yourself over to somebody like a cult. It's just that there's no validation for this except how you receive it, how it feels to you. So again, we are adults here, and we are responsible for changing our beliefs based on information we hear. And the information can be given to us by the lowest person on the planet or the highest person on the planet. And it has truth or it does not. So that's it's a place of being willing to trust your own judgment. And some of us are not willing to trust your own judgment. So I suggest that if that's something you're dealing with, that's a form of resistance that, I guess that's what you're working on. The other information that I pulled from the lecture into this section has to do with limitations on access to spiritual knowledge. This is another area where people say, well, if it's true, where's the proof? Where's the evidence? Where's the rest of the knowledge? And my understanding that I have developed over the years, I like to express it comically. I have a certain size brain, and spiritual information is very big, and they can only get a certain amount in. I like science fiction, and there's a science fiction movie, I believe, well, it's done a lot now, where the person is getting downloads of information, and it can blow up your brain. I can imagine that being true of spiritual knowledge. So the question is, can you work with what you've got? Can you work with what you glean? Can you work with what comes off the page at you instead of demanding to see the entire curriculum or the entire realm of knowledge before you even go any further? There was a Q&A in this lecture about how spirits can read. I was fascinated by that. And the guide's answer was, it's not the words on the paper, it's the energy, and we see the energy. So imagine, if you would, that you open up a book, and instead of reading the words, you can just feel the energy of the author. And you can actually see the pictures of the story that they are telling. It literally comes off the page at you. And that's how the guide described how spirits look like they can read in trance through a human being's eyes, or how a spirit could know what was on a page. Another one question that was asked was about space and time. Now, time was addressed in Patrick Lecture 112, basically that there is no time, that time is a dimension or an illusion or some combination of that happens on the material world, but it's not as separate. Time exists as a concept in spirit, but it's not boxed away. We're not trapped in the now waiting for the present, and the past is locked away. Spirit moves freely among this. Time has I don't even know what word to use, but that it represents a spiritual concept rather than a spiritual clock. One way of understanding this is that if you get a a spiritual awakening. Everybody's had one of these. If you're over 20, you've had one. Small, large, doesn't matter, you've had one. There's a moment of aha, there's a moment of understanding, of knowing that feels like an enlargement and an opening. That when that happens, whatever that was about, it's not about everything, it's not all or nothing, it's just you get a piece now and a piece later. But when this happens, it affects your past. Now, from a human perspective, what it affects is when we look at the past retrospectively, because we can't act in the past, but we can see the past differently, then we can understand a situation completely differently. Again, films use that as a device where they show you something and then they explain that was wrong, and you want to flip back the pages and look at it again because you were sure it was going in one direction and they're saying it went in another. The spiritual concept of time would mean that an aha in this moment would affect your past, affect it, not change it or dissolve it, and it would affect your future even before you got there. So the phrase is often used that an awareness, an opening, a transition, a transformation affects past, present, and future. And so this is, once again, I'm trying to be very soft about this because I'm a human being trying to explain something that I don't actually know totally what I'm talking about. But as explained by the guide, and as I have personally experienced it energetically, space and time don't exist in spirit. That's why they can move back and forth with ease. But it exists because they move. They just don't have to travel. They don't have to hop a bus. So, a bit lengthy, but I hope you enjoy this lecture. There's some ideas here that I haven't presented for a long time. And I thought it would be fun. So enjoy Patrick Lecture 15. And thanks for listening.